So next we get into FIFRA. You should know this one because it is phenomenally important in agriculture. The Federal Insecticide, Fungicide, and Rodenticide Act, FIFRA. That's right up there with FSMA, Food Safety Modernization Act, in terms of, if you're an ag student and you took one of Triano's classes, you should know those two acronyms. They're central to the laws and regulations of agriculture. So FIFRA 1947 has certainly been amended numerous times since then, and some of the specifics of chemicals controlled under FIFRA have been modified over and over and over and over again as new scientific data is learned. But FIFRA initially was focused on pesticide safety. And pesticide is an umbrella term, meaning that it covers a lot of other types of biological toxins or biological manipulators of a life cycle. So there can be things that don't directly kill an organism, but prevent them from reaching sexual maturity. So there are some insecticides that would fall into that category. They don't kill, they prevent proper, complete development of their life cycle, and the life cycle is broken. Anyway, pesticide. Doesn't matter what the pest is, if it is something that kills or interferes with the life cycle of any type of organism, and even some non-organisms, it is a pesticide. So there's fungicides, there's insecticides, rodenticides for rodents, virucides for viruses. That's not considered a living organism, but you still want to kill viruses. How do you kill something that's not really living? It's not something I'm going to talk about in this lecture. But virucides, nematicides for nematodes, and on and on, miticides. There are so many different specific names, things that kill mites, kill nematodes, kill insects, kill fungi, bactericides kill bacteria, and on and on and on. All of them fall under this umbrella of pesticides. And so even though FIFRA only handles 3 of them, technically all of the categories that I mentioned, and I'm sure a few I missed, fall under this umbrella of FIFRA. Bactericides are covered in FIFRA, at least used in agriculture. Bactericides used in a hospital, that's a different story. Anyway, requirements on the labeling, one of the most important things. People were using all of these poisons starting in the 1800s, and there was very little information. You got this bucket of something and it's killing people because they didn't know how to use it. They didn't know how to be safe. They didn't know how to properly mix it. So now it has to be labeled what's in there and how do you use it safely. Who manufactured it? Who distributed it? All of that has to be part of the labeling of pesticides. And that's just the tip of the iceberg on FIFRA, but it's one of the crucial first things that it did. So what about pesticide applicator safety? Here's another acronym, PPE. If you want to be in agriculture, you better know that. I could walk up to you on the street. Hey, what's PPE? And you say, personal protective equipment. Because of course you know that. You're an ag student. Personal protective equipment. And that is all the stuff and maybe more that this person is wearing. And there's PPE for medical safety, for biohazards, for pesticide safety, for clean room safety in manufacturing computer chips, you name it. PPE is not specific to agriculture. Anybody who needs to wear something that is specific to their work environment must know what the PPE is. And in agriculture, it gets a little more complicated because PPE changes depending on what chemicals you're using. Sometimes you do need a full hazmat type suit. Not too often, but sometimes you do. Other times you can get by with what you see here. This is clearly not hazmat. You can see the person's hair. Their neck, I'm sure, is slightly exposed. So this is plenty for many chemical application uses, however. You've got safety goggles or face shield of some sort. You have some kind of respirator or breathing lung protection. You have some sort of chemical resistant coveralls. And those coveralls need to be somehow joined to the gloves where they're tucked into longer gloves with proper chemical resistant gloves, chemical resistant rubber boots, and I hope those are chemical resistant rubber boots. I think they are. You don't want to wear leather boots. Your leather work boots, you want chemical resistant boots. And so this is a person who's set up for agricultural safety. Now, depending on the chemical you're using, the respirator might change. The eye protection might change. How strong of an eye protection do you need? What type of respirator filter do you need? Well, it depends on what I'm filtering out. Some chemicals need one level of filtration, other chemicals need another level of respirator filtration. Do you need a Tyvek suit? Oftentimes you do, but not for every chemical. Some chemicals you just need to cover yourself. You don't necessarily need a chemical resistant suit. What about the gloves? It's not only the material the gloves are made of, but the fact that gloves should never be lined for comfort. Never, ever, ever use lined gloves in agriculture with pesticide use. There are problems with lined gloves, meaning they have some fuzzy, cushiony, feel good on the fingers type of material on the inside. But the thickness as well. So you might need nitrile gloves of a certain thickness, or you might need a specific type of rubber, chemical resistant rubber. Depends on the chemical. So when you're working with pesticides, you need to be sure you're using the proper PPE. Is this guy working with the proper PPE? Oh, hell no. No eye protection. Wearing a dust mask, which isn't good enough for anything except dust and maybe slowing the spread of COVID, but it is not for prevention of inhaling chemicals, period. No gloves, no Tyvek, just a hoodie. This is a disaster. This is a safety disaster. Now, hopefully this person is just spraying a soap solution for aphid control or something. Otherwise, they're in strict violation. Even that, you can't spray anything, even soap solution that you could spray directly in your eyes and it wouldn't blind you. It'd sting a little bit. Even that, you would be cited by Monterey County Ag Commissioner's Office. What is the PPE? You read the label for everything, how to mix it, how to use it, proper application and concentration, and how many ounces per acre, on and on and on. Read the dang label. You got to think about wind and drift. How does that work? And And there are a lot of factors there. It's one of the biggest problems in pesticide safety, in my experience, where people need to get the job done and they're out there getting the job done. And where do we live? Central Coast, where it's always windy. Salinas Valley, really windy. And you got to get the job done. And so you want to be able to tell your boss, I did it. And in the process, you're not doing a good job because all the chemical that's supposed to go on your plants, a bunch of it's being moved downwind with that that wind that's moving through, and the drift can cause problems with workers that are downwind of you. Lots of lawsuits and sicknesses because some idiot is spraying on a windy day and is spraying part of on the field and part on the workers downwind of them. Stupid, dangerous, and has caused lots of problems. And we've also had cases that I have been involved in where somebody sprays a really bad, really bad chemical that starts killing our lettuce because of wind drift. They spray it on their cotton when we're growing lettuce seed, and it drifts onto our lettuce and starts killing our lettuce plants. Not good. Triple rinsing. This is for containers, and you should know that. How do you properly clean a pesticide container? You triple rinse it, and there are appropriate rules for how and where you do it, but essentially you rinse it out, shake it, shake it, shake it, and dump it out once, do it again, and do it again. Once you've triple rinsed it, then you can take it to a chemical container recycling facility. I think they still have one off of Highway 101. What's that called? Anyway, there's a facility not too far away. If you go to Highway 101 in Castroville, head south to the very next exit south of Castroville. Supervision. People who are doing the sprays need to be properly supervised. What are the requirements under OSHA for that? Actually, pesticide safety, excuse me, this is not OSHA. What are the requirements for the Department of Pesticide Regulations for supervision? You need to know that if you are the supervisor, and you need to know it if you're the applicator. My rule of thumb is that if anybody's spraying, there's always a person nearby, always, who knows what they are doing in a supervisory capacity. And if you schedule things right, it's usually possible. I always found it possible, so that there's never somebody who's an applicator that's alone. And you check with them on the radio periodically, whatever is necessary. If you're not, if you're the supervisor that's not there and you have an on-site person who is there, you still check in on the crew. That's not required under the law. You can leave people alone doing applicator work as long as you check in with them at intervals appropriate for that chemical. I still never liked that. I always had somebody was always there with an applicator nearby doing something, watching the person. Training. I've mentioned training already a number of times. You've got to train people before they start the work in a level that is appropriate for their task. Are they a true handler of pesticides? Are they an applicator? Are they just working around pesticides after the fact? You need to know. And then you have to document. There's the NOI, another beautiful acronym. NOI is the Notice of Intent. Notice of Intent. And for some chemicals, you have to give advanced notice that you plan on spraying this chemical on a particular field, on a particular day, with all the details, and then the Ag Commissioner is going to come back and either approve or not approve of your notice of intent. Now, usually they approve it because growers know what they can and can't do, But occasionally it's like, no, 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 you can't do that there. There's a school too close, which you should have known already as the grower. But that's how you learn. If you suggest that you're going to do something or file a notice that you're going to do something, and the ag commissioner's job is to make sure that you're doing it right. Then there's postings where you put signs up around all corners of the field so anybody approaching that field can see the signs that tell you what was sprayed, when it was sprayed, and when you can re-enter that field. Postings are critical. And it seems like it's been a long time, but in terms of modern agriculture, it's been not that long. I was an adult already when postings became the law that they are today. The Federal Environmental Pesticide Control Act of 1972. And I guess there should be no surprise, the word environmental and that year that you're looking at, the early 1970s. The Environmental Protection Agency, or EPA, to ensure that the labeling and classification of pesticides protected farmers, farm workers, and other persons coming in contact with pesticides or pesticide residues. So again, it's making sure that everybody's safe. Then comes the Worker Protection Standard, WPS. Oh, joy. You're in a class filled with acronyms. The WPS, or Worker Protection Standard, states that no pesticide is applied so as to contact, either directly or through drift, any worker or other person other than an appropriately and equipped handler. 1992. Yeah, I mean, to some of you that might seem like a long time ago. That's recent in agricultural history. And it blows my mind that it took until 1992 to say that you can't spray a toxic chemical on an agricultural field and just inadvertently spray the workers too. And the person doing the spraying is in full personal protective equipment, not the workers that are 200 feet that way getting blasted in the face with the wind and drift. It blows my mind that it took until 1992 to establish the Worker Protection Standard. But here we are. We have it now, and we've had it for at least some time. The Worker Protection Standard applies to all agriculture. There are exemptions for the operator's immediate family. So if it's your kid, you can spray them with toxic poison. That's okay. Not really. So the exemption doesn't apply with entry during application. You can't have your kids going unprotected into an applied area, and you can't have them going into a field during the restricted entry interval. REI, another wonderful acronym, the restricted entry interval. You need to know all these acronyms, folks. It could be on a test. So the restricted entry interval is used a lot in agriculture. That is the moment you spray, the restricted entry interval starts. And then you post the field with when the workers can go back into that field. And the restricted entry interval can be 1 day, 2 days, 2 weeks, whatever. It depends on the chemical. And you're not allowed to go back in that field during the REI unless you have to, in which case you have to put on full personal protective equipment, the full hazmat suit type equipment, in order to go in to repair a pipe or do something. But generally speaking, you spray, you just stay out. One last acronym that I want to give you that isn't on the screen here, but it's PHI. P as in pre, H, harvest, interval, the pre-harvest interval. And the pre-harvest interval starts at the exact same moment as the restricted entry interval, the moment you spray. So you're done spraying the field, you put up your postings with your restricted entry interval information, but the PHI is the date you must wait until you can actually harvest that material. And that's really important because the material, you can't just harvest it, hold it, and then sell it once the PHI has elapsed. No, it has to stay in the field attached to the plant, no harvest operations at all until the PHI is expired. And that can be a problem. It's a scheduling issue. So let's say your restricted entry interval is 3 days, but your PHI, your pre-harvest interval, is 10 days. Well, workers can go in and do weeding or whatever they need to do after 3 days, but you can't harvest that material for 10 days. And I've seen it happen where somebody wasn't paying attention, they sprayed some material, 10-day PHI, and what happens? 5 days later was the scheduled harvest date. Now, for some crops, can you hold it for 5 days in the field and harvest it a little bit late? Yeah, for some crops. For most things like lettuce, 5 days, you might as well just disc it now. It's dead. And that's what we had to do when somebody screwed up. And you don't want 80 acres of lettuce, 2 blocks of lettuce, 2 big blocks of lettuce to be disced down because somebody, whoops, didn't pay attention to the PHI. The Certification of Pesticide Applicators Standard 1992 requires the applicator of restricted use pesticides to be certified. This doesn't mean all pesticide. This is restricted use pesticides, which are the more dangerous ones. The ones we use less and less year after year because they get more regulations applied to them. Companies try to avoid them, but they're still in high use. So if you're somebody who's considered the applicator, you're doing tasks that are performed as an applicator, you must be certified for application. Now, there is, again, exemption for operators' immediate family. You can personally train your kid and have them doing certain things. They still should be safe, but your own family members can be personally trained as opposed to state certified. And again, during the application and during the REI period, the exemption for family members never applies. No pesticide is applied so as to contact, did I do the wrong one? No pesticide is applied so as to contact either directly or through drift any worker or other person other than an appropriately equipped handler. Thought I already did this one. Most FIFRA activities have been delegated to the states. Standards adopted in Arizona and California are more restrictive than the federal laws. And so in the states, FIFRA is a law, a code with its code of regulations at the federal level. The states must do this. But what does the federal government do? They basically hand it over. The responsibility is handed over to the states. Now your responsibility, do it. Here's the rules. You'd go and do it. And so in California, we have the Department of Pesticide Regulations, the DPR, the California Department of Pesticide Regulations. They're responsible to make sure that California is doing everything that meets federal safety requirements. And so our California legislature has added a few extra things that make the workers' protection safety standards higher than are required under FIFRA. So workers are more protected in California than they are in most other states, or Arizona as well. But then what does the Department of Pesticide Regulation do? They say, all right, we have to follow federal FIFRA law. We have to follow any amendments to FIFRA that have occurred ever. And we have to follow anything our state legislature has required for agricultural pesticide worker safety and environmental safety. And so then the DPR hands off the responsibility, the real boots on the ground work is the agricultural commissioner's offices. And each county or small group of counties has an agricultural commissioner's office, and the ag commissioner is responsible to really enforce these rules. The EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency Worker Protection Standard, has 10 standards. Again, we're looking at another agency involved in protections. And as usual, California's rules are stricter than federal. Another quick break.